Local 514 interviewed Michael Fish, a retired architecture, to discuss the REM's business model, its expansion, and previous commuter systems. To hear more, stay tuned for the whole interview.
And are you on a laptop?
No, no, well, it's a desktop.
Okay.
It's a big screen that is also the monitor
Okay.
and the computer, and then I have a separate keyboard.
Is
But I'll
it-
just adjust my thing so I'm higher.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's what I was going to ask.
That's better.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So Michael, could you just please state your name and any organization that you're affiliated with, or expertise on transit?
Yeah, my name is Michael Fish. I'm a retired architect, and I have been involved with renovation, heritage buildings, speculative building, and so I know a little bit about finance and so on. And I've been working with Transparence mainly to improve the REM, or in fact get it nationalized and get the province to buy it back, as long as it's going to be there, and try to stop its extension, because it's very noxious to the development of the region. I've been working with Transparence mainly, but with anybody who attempts to stop the REM or improve it.
Thank you so much. So I know that you have many thoughts on this, but just to start, what do you think of the government's approach to the business model of the expansion of the REM?
Well, it's a public-private partnership corporate structure, and one which is very it's very bad for any kind of infrastructure which the public owns and which the public has to pay for almost entirely. So really, the public partnership is mainly the creature of the Caisse de dépôt, who are investment bankers above all, and it's they who have who inveigled the province to use this corporate vehicle and allow them to do what they're doing, which again is a very bad plan. It's very expensive. In its actual choice of routes, it has destroyed profitable commuter services and substituted very expensive commuter services that are really not adapted to the needs of any commuter service. The REM is really ideally used for very short runs in non-urban settings. It's useful in airports and industrial zones, but it's very bad for city environments. It's noisy. It's not street friendly. It doesn't get rid of automobiles. It doesn't attract people away from their automobiles, and it's ruinously expensive. For example, the REM took the Two Mountains commuter service, basically retired it. It was costing the public 13 cents per passenger per kilometer, and substituted a service which is much less convenient and has a lot of other disadvantages compared to the original commuter service, and it cost 73 cents. So they exchanged a public service that was costing 13 cents for something that's cost 73 cents, and it's a worse service. You know, by every provable measure. When it went before the Bureau des Audiences Publiques sur l'Environnement, the BAP, they just hated this plan. And anyway, so its capital cost compared to other modes of transit that could have been used to improve service in Montreal, its cost is between 7 and 8 times, sometimes 10 times the cost of equivalent lengths of services by tramways. You know, modern tramways, which can be which can use 4 or 5 wagons cruising the streets, and these have a calming effect on street life. They replace cars because they're much more convenient than cars, and they encourage commercial activity along the street. So, which REMs, when they're in their form of sky trains, actively discourage. It's very few cities use sky trains or sky trains running in tunnels, which Montreal seems to have fallen in love with, especially in the East End, because a sky train running in a tunnel is really just a tramway pretending it's a metro for the price of a metro. And so as a financial proposition, and even as a transit proposition, it's just the worst of all possible worlds, and no one would accept it. And in fact, no independent expert has ever written in the 8 years that the REM has been around, since 2015 or so. No one has ever written an independent assessment of the REM as being good for the city, good for the population, good for transit, and good for the financial aspect of urban transportation. It's really a disaster. It's also very inconvenient. It requires that every other mode of transit, every bus anywhere near it, cannot run a parallel route. So that means every bus trip anywhere near a REM has to go to the REM and then transfer to the REM and then take it to as close to where it's going by the REM. And then the person has to get off the REM and find another bus and then go to his destination. So those transfers involve 40 feet of vertical travel from a bus to a REM, and that's difficult for people. even when there are escalators or elevators for people that are not fully able. So everybody that realizes this is kind of waiting to get even by using their car as much as possible. And in fact, on the Lake of Two Mountains line, the promoters don't even pretend to replace cars running on the same line in the same directions. So why spend all that money getting rid of a good commuter system with a bad one that doesn't replace cars? And who would do that? It's really it's really a scandal that that kind of the business community, of which I am not a part anymore, that the business community is absolutely silent about this. The business community, which knows all about figures and financial forecasts and the cost of money and wise spending, has adopted this REM absolutely silently, because no doubt there's hardly a business in the region that isn't somehow dependent on the Caisse de Dépôt or the government, who are going to push this thing through come hell or high water, and just make everybody live with it. Actually, it's so bad that I think people will because they will start to live the disadvantages of this over other solutions to the transit problem, which is mainly trams. That they just will use it as little as possible. The worst thing about it probably is that its governance is entirely non-transparent. No one really gets direct figures on how much it's going to cost the taxpayer, sorted out from other figures which disguise the actual cost of what a REM is going to cost over what other modes of transit would have cost. And that's because the law that created the REM and created the relationship between the Caisse, the government, and the companies operating the REM, all those companies don't have to publish any figures. If they have any disputes with the public people involved, those disputes have to be settled in private and not even mentioned to the public that a dispute exists. So it's a very rare hiding of what an essential public service, which should be owned by the public and entirely transparent, is actually costing the taxpayers. Reinforcing this situation is a gag law, which has the name of a whistleblower law, protection of whistleblowers. That whistleblower law actually is a gag law because it says that anybody who finds public malfeasance, if somebody in the public realm doing wrong, including the Caisse de Dépôt, they have to take their complaint and describe the problem to a government official who then fixes the problem, presumably. But if if the whistleblower decides that's not good enough, well, he can then make it public, but he'll never work again in Quebec, and he'll probably never work again for a private company because, you know, everybody hates whistleblowers. So, and that whistleblower law is very strict, and people don't know about it. But everybody who works on the REM, they've been told, no whistleblowing.
What is that law
Uh,
called?
A whistleblowing?
Yeah, I'm pulled up your notes too. You like, how exactly can they prevent? So sorry, you said a whistleblower law. Like, is there an exact name, or that's just what it's called and what they enforce in the project?
It's I don't know what the French. I think they use the whistleblower term in the English title of the law. It's basically to make sure that all public information stays private, and that nobody tattletales. They don't appear to want any Julian Assanges around, because this is going to really cost a lot of money and a lot of inconvenient travel. Every I mentioned that every bus on a parallel with a REM line has to take its passengers to the REM. And then the REM delivers them as close to as possible to. Well, that's very expensive and doesn't really help the efficiency of the actual movement of a bus user or a public transit user to the fastest, most convenient, most comfortable way of getting to where he's going. So that's a big disadvantage. There's another thing. In the corporate setup of the public-private partnership, the original structure was to be 50% owned by the case, 25% owned by the province, and 25% owned by the federal government. But in the several years it took to get everybody to agree to that, the federal contribution ended up being a forgivable loan of 25% of the 25% of the cost of the project to the case. So now the distribution of ownership is the province owes 25%, and the case owns 75%. And that just kind of slipped through the public, unless you take the case as being the public, which they insist they are not the public. The public lost, their 25% of the ownership. The federal money could have been given to the province, but it wasn't. And so the case gets 8% on its investment. So right away, its annual interest went from 50%. It's the basic principal went from 50% of the value of the project to 75% of the value of the project, and they get 8% on that money. So that federal donation to the case takes money out of the pockets of the local taxpayers, because they have to subsidize you know, the great majority of the operating costs of the REM when it's running. So that's all very weird, and dare I say that this partnership is going to exist for anywhere between 1 and 200 years. Now that's, you know, reporters have talked to me over the years and said, "Give me a smoking gun. I would really like to write up a story about how bad the REM is." But you could start there. I mean, where is there an arrangement between anybody and a public body that's going to last between 1 and 200 years?
Why do you say this long?
Well, it's just unheard of. The only long leases that bind property that I know of are very long leases in cities like London or New York, where land is leased sometimes for 900 years. But for infrastructure, for the cost of infrastructure, the life of which won't get anywhere near 200 years, that's just crazy. You know, the steam engine was barely invented 200 years ago, and I can imagine that the technology is going to overtake the REM and any successive venture in the same way as you know, energy and computerization are going to make the REM useless in about 30 years.
Do they have?
So
Sorry.
I was just going to say it's just the weirdest corporate setup that one has ever seen. There's another thing. The RAM. One sec. Okay, it's going to be answered. The RAM very proudly was put out to the public as being a unique part of the transit system. And Michael Sabia said, we don't bother with any other parts of the system than the REM itself. Well, that's really crazy, because in a metropolitan transit system, all the parts have to be thoroughly, closely integrated, intimately, so that they all work together. But in fact, the REM frankly destroys it. It just mashes a whole lot of very positive things about the rest of the transit system around the region. Nowhere is this worse than in the fact that it took over the tunnel that took trains from the north side of the mountain to the south side of the mountain, which meant trains that are going to be running between Quebec City and Ottawa through Montreal are going to have to stop in Laval, and then connections will be made through the subway or a REM in Laval to Central Station. So, you know, Montreal will be off the Trans-Canada high-speed services map for however long it takes to build another tunnel, which will cost billions of dollars, that should have been reserved for the Mount Royal Tunnel, which could easily have taken high-speed railway trains with a little updating. It's just destroyed that aspect of the integrated system, and it also ruined commuter services from the East End and from off-island East End. There are now immense problems with the future of commuter services from the East End. Now, the REM, which was proposed for the East Island, and which was going to cost as much as a metro for the same length. Those plans are still in play, despite the fact that the city and the province said they were taking it over from the case. But I don't see the case withdrawing their financial arrangements, and I don't see them not operating the system if they build it. Further, they're going to extend the damn thing off the island to duplicate the commuter services that are now run by the Mascouche Railway. But the REM will be eventually extended to a further eastern rural municipality where it will be, hopelessly unsuited, where a commuter railway is really the solution. And you have this service, 2 or 3 wagons going back and forth on a very long journey every few minutes, which in a commuter, in a distant setting from a central part of the city, makes no sense at all. That's actually what's going to happen to the former commuter service in on the west, in the north to the northwest, where the very successful Two Mountains commuter train line, that is going to be replaced by a REM, which has 2 or 3 or 4 cars running every 15 minutes. But in off rush hours, that's way too much service. And in rush hours, it's not enough. So it's very difficult to find anything positive to say about it, and nobody has said anything positive about it who possesses independent expertise. Some of the most eminent people with the most experience, just excoriated the thing from top to bottom and said it was just a terrible thing, as did the BAM. It's really a shame that the people that should be, the independent experts, the academics, and they're all academics actually that have the independence and the expertise to criticize it. And they've done a good job. From time to time, somebody running one of these services, for instance, Mr. Yell, who runs all the commuter services, the commuter trains, he gave an interview a couple of years ago that said his job was basically completely screwed because his all of his lines, their efficient running was just destroyed by the by the REM, where it couldn't integrate with what his lines were doing.
We just have 9 more minutes on the call. There's one thing I wanted to ask, but is there something you want to bring up before that?
Well, there are royalties that are paid, that are going to have to be paid by people who want to make developments near the REM. And they're fairly substantial, and they're upfront costs for any developer. And those are new. That financial fandangle is very new for this kind of project, a transit project, and it's based on the theory that your land has become more valuable because the REM is servicing it with better transit happening, but therefore the REM should be paid something for the capital that they've invested in it. So that basically restricts the kind of people who are going to be developing. They're going to be bigger, more powerful companies, and there'll be less development. Just a second. Oh yeah, the routes that the case has chosen, to the extent humanly possible, has been to direct all the customers of the REM to end up in case properties. Most of the downtown stations that the REM will touch, the big real estate around all the stations is owned by the case. And so that's going to increase the value of their properties quite a bit, probably lots more than just, well, we're now sort of monopolizing more customers than. So it'll have a certain effect on promoting all those properties that the case owns. And the fact that the case will have knowledge of all the developments that are coming along, in part due to the fact that people are going to have to pay them royalties, it gives them a commanding position over most of the valuable real estate development that's going to occur in the city for as long as they're collecting royalties and so on, because they have a fundamental conflict of interest. They're bankers. They develop real estate. They own real estate. They sell it and buy it. And anybody that's going to be doing development along these routes, the case can approach them, and sort of muscle them into doing business with the case, with their mortgage companies, with their experts, with their lawyers, and so on. It's just a hellhole of giving the case this commanding position, which isn't really kosher. It gives them a monopoly position that it would be very difficult for them not to abuse. And the fact that they're a publicly owned corporation, and that they invest for the good of pensioners and so on, it's really, it puts them in the class of predator hedge fund hedge funds where they don't really have to practice business like everybody else. They get to have a preferred position that allows them to behave badly as far as if they want to. And I can't understand, you know, the old saying was that what's good for GM is good for America. And to a great extent, if you ask the people in Montreal who are in business, they would say that what's good for the case is good for Quebec or Montreal or whatever, but really it isn't. They're just another commercial investment fund, and they make mistakes, and really they have another. They should be out there helping Quebec businesses that need and want the services, the financial services that they can supply. That's enough for them to do. And so I'll just finish off by saying that they have to divert, they have to divest themselves of this investment. They can't own 50% of a great many corporate efforts, and so they have to get rid of that. And so a lot of that ownership that they have, even running to the 200-year margin, you know, they're gonna sell that to the best price, for the best price they can get, and that may be someone, you know, in Zanzibar or the Cayman Islands or somewhere where we can't touch it. And so there's a window of opportunity. 5 years after the REM starts, that the province can buy the whole thing back, put it in the public sphere, make the governance transparent, make at least it possible for people to see where the money is going, and basically act like proper public servants, doing the public good first, not second, third, fourth, or fifth, or at all. And really, without looking for more notes, I'll let you have that.
Thank you.
Okay.
There's only a minute left on the call, so it might cut out. Apologize if it does, but I just wanted to ask, you know, what does this mean for the future of Quebec infrastructure, that such a large, profitable company is, you know, having such a large role in this? And the call might cut out, so sorry about that.
Okay, the public-private partnership, which seems to have been a lover that every public institution has fallen in love with, it just should be wiped off the map. It's a very bad way of doing business, the public business. You hire experts, you have civil servants who are sworn to do the public to pay the public interest first, and you have big companies bid to build you know, the projects themselves, and that's the way it's been done over the last over the last 50 years, until there were so few investment